I'm going to show you the #1 most powerful food combination to lower blood sugar quickly. Not a single food, not a supplement, not a quick hack, a specific combination of whole foods that work together to improve insulin resistance, the root cause of high blood sugar. This isn't low carb, and it's not about cutting foods out. It's about putting the right foods together in the right order so your cells can respond to insulin again. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to build that combination using a simple, delicious meal you can make at home. I'll show you exactly how to build it, explain the science behind each ingredient, and by the end, you'll have a meal that doesn't just manage blood sugar, it helps reverse insulin resistance, the root problem behind high blood sugar levels. And quick heads up, if you want the full step-by-step plan to reverse insulin resistance beyond one meal, we have a free Mastering Diabetes training where we break down the lifestyle habits that fix the root cause for good. Just comment training below and we'll send it your way. This food combination is one powerful tool, but the real change happens when the right habits work together. Let's start with the foundation. Why food combinations matter more than single foods. When it comes to lowering blood sugar, everything starts with one thing: insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity is not about how much insulin your body makes. It's about how responsive your cells are to insulin's signal. Here's the simplest way to picture it. Insulin is the signal that tells your muscle and liver cells, open up. Glucose is ready to come in and be used for energy. When cells are insulin sensitive, that signal works effortlessly. Glucose moves out of the bloodstream, blood sugar stays stable, energy production runs smoothly. But insulin resistance changes the entire equation. Instead, inside insulin-resistant muscle and liver cells, fat droplets accumulate and interfere with insulin signaling pathways. This doesn't just slow glucose entry, it blocks the signal itself. The message arrives, but the cell doesn't respond appropriately. So even though insulin is present, even though you haven't eaten too much sugar, glucose gets stranded in the bloodstream. That's why focusing on single foods misses the point. Blood sugar doesn't improve because of one magic ingredient. It improves when multiple metabolic levers are pulled at the same time. This is where food combinations become powerful. When you eat meals that combine high fiber, slows glucose absorption, and improves insulin receptor signaling, whole carbohydrates provide clean, predictable glucose instead of rapid surges. Low fat reduces interference with insulin signaling inside cells. Natural acids and antioxidants improve mitochondrial function and reduce inflammation. You don't just change what you eat, you change how your body processes glucose. These combinations influence 3 critical systems simultaneously. They slow how quickly glucose enters the bloodstream, they reduce how aggressively the liver releases glucose, and they improve how responsive muscle cells are to insulin. That's why blood sugar can improve faster than people expect. Not because the approach is extreme, not because carbs are being canceled out, but because the metabolic environment inside the body is shifting from insulin resistant to insulin responsive. This is precision nutrition, not restriction. And once insulin sensitivity starts improving, foods that once caused spikes stop being the problem because the cells are finally doing their job again. Step 1, the slow burning carbohydrate anchor. This is where most people get it wrong. Let's start with a food that confuses almost everyone at first: buckwheat. Despite the name, buckwheat has nothing to do with wheat. It's not a grain, it's not gluten, it's actually a seed, and metabolically, it behaves nothing like bread, pasta, or flour-based carbs. This distinction matters more than you think, because when people say carbs spike my blood sugar, they're usually talking about refined carbohydrates, foods that have been stripped of their natural structure. Buckwheat is the opposite of that. In its intact form, buckwheat comes packaged with fiber, magnesium, and unique plant compounds that directly support glucose metabolism and insulin signaling. And because the structure of the seed is still intact, glucose is released slowly and predictably, not all at once. That's the key. Not low carb, not portion control, but digestion speed. When buckwheat is eaten whole, not ground into flour, it forces your digestive system to do real work. That slows absorption, gives insulin time to act, and prevents the sudden glucose surge that overwhelms insulin-resistant cells. This isn't theory. We see this clearly in the research. A comprehensive review published in Nutrients looked at buckwheat's metabolic effects and found consistent associations with improved insulin sensitivity, lower fasting glucose, and better long-term glycemic control, even in populations at high risk for type 2 diabetes. What makes buckwheat especially interesting is why it works. Buckwheat contains resistant starch and soluble fiber that slow gastric emptying, blunt post-meal glucose spikes, and reduce the insulin demand required to manage that glucose. It also contains bioactive compounds like rutin that help reduce oxidative stress, a major contributor to insulin resistance at the cellular level. So, even though buckwheat is clearly a carbohydrate, it behaves nothing like refined carbs. Same macronutrient category, completely different metabolic outcome. And this is where people have their first "wait, what?" moment. Because once you understand this, you realize the problem was never carbs themselves. The problem was how fast they hit your bloodstream and how inflamed and insulin resistant your cells were when they arrived. Bring water to a boil, add whole buckwheat groats, let them simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes until the water is absorbed and the texture is tender. No oil, no processing, just intact structure. Here's the reframe I want you to remember. Buckwheat doesn't spike less because it's special. It spikes less because it respects physiology. It slows digestion. It lowers insulin demand, and it reduces metabolic stress instead of adding to it. That's why this is the anchor of the meal. And once you understand this principle, every other food choice becomes easier because you stop asking, is this a carb? And you start asking the question that actually matters. How does this food behave inside my body? Step 2, the fiber layer that actually controls the spike. Now we build the part of the meal that quietly does most of the heavy lifting, the fiber layer. This is where foods like onions, bell peppers, zucchini, and garlic come in, not as decoration, not just for flavor, but as metabolic regulators. Fiber isn't passive. It actively controls how fast glucose moves from your plate into your bloodstream. When you eat carbohydrates without enough fiber, glucose enters quickly, insulin has to scramble, and blood sugar rises sharply. But when fiber is present throughout the meal, digestion slows down. Glucose trickles in instead of flooding in, and that gives insulin time to actually do its job. That timing difference is everything. Fiber also changes what's happening deeper inside your cells. These vegetables are rich in polyphenols and antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress, one of the most overlooked drivers of insulin resistance. When oxidative stress is high, insulin signaling pathways don't work properly. It's like static on a phone line. The signal is there, but the message doesn't get through. And that's why chronic high blood sugar isn't just a glucose problem. It's an inflammatory cellular environment problem. A 2022 review published in Frontiers in Nutrition looked at fiber-rich, plant-forward diets and their effects on insulin resistance and glycemic control. What they found was striking. Higher dietary fiber intake consistently improved insulin sensitivity, lowered post-meal glucose spikes, and reduced markers of oxidative stress and inflammation, even without calorie restriction or weight loss. That last part matters. These improvements didn't happen because people ate less food. They happened because fiber changed how the body processed glucose at the cellular level. And this is why we don't talk about fiber as a side dish. Fiber sets the metabolic tone for the entire meal. When it's present early and consistently, insulin works better. The liver releases less glucose. Muscle cells become more responsive. Not overnight, not magically, but meal by meal, day by day. This is why the Mastering Diabetes method doesn't rely on tricks like eating foods in a special order or adding fats to slow things down. Instead, we build meals where fiber is baked into the structure from the start. Because when fiber leads the meal, blood sugar follows. Want a free training on how to eat the Mastering Diabetes way to reverse the root cause of high blood sugar levels? Comment training below and we'll send it your way. Step 3, roasting without oil. This matters. Now we roast. This step is critical. Most roasted vegetable dishes rely on oil, and even small amounts of added fat can temporarily block insulin's ability to move glucose into muscle cells. That's why this recipe stays oil-free. Flavor comes from high heat, caramelization, and natural vegetable sugars, not fat. Keeping fat low is not only about calories. It's about allowing insulin to do its job unobstructed. Step 4, the spike flattening protein plus fiber combo. Now let's talk about a food that almost everyone with diabetes misunderstands: chickpeas and legumes in general. A lot of people with blood sugar issues are scared of beans. And if beans spike your blood sugar right now, that doesn't mean the beans are bad. It means your body is currently insulin resistant, and beans are one of the first foods to expose that. They don't cause the problem, they reveal it. But here's the twist most people never hear. Once you fix the underlying insulin resistance, beans and other legumes stop spiking your glucose and start stabilizing it better than almost any other food. Chickpeas are rich in soluble fiber, the kind that forms gels and slows digestion; resistant starch, a fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria; plant protein, which helps blunt glucose spikes and supports metabolic signaling. And there's real science showing this combination works. In a controlled feeding study published in Nutrients, researchers investigated the metabolic effects of legumes, including chickpeas, on people with insulin resistance and elevated glucose. What they found was striking. When participants consumed legume-rich meals, their post-meal glucose levels were significantly lower compared with meals without legumes. But that's not all. The effect carried forward to the next meal too. This is called the second meal effect, and it's one of the strongest indicators that legumes are doing something more than just slowing absorption. Here's how that works. Soluble fiber and resistant starch from legumes travel to the large intestine, where gut bacteria ferment them. That fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and propionate. These aren't just byproducts. Short-chain fatty acids are signaling molecules that improve insulin sensitivity, particularly in muscle cells. Why does that matter? Your skeletal muscle is the largest glucose sink in your entire body, meaning it has the greatest capacity to remove glucose from the bloodstream. But when muscle cells are insulin resistant, that sink is blocked and glucose just sits in the bloodstream. Short-chain fatty acids help reopen that sink. They improve the way insulin signals muscle cells to take up glucose. Over time, this doesn't just flatten post-meal spikes, it actually helps clear fat out of muscle tissue, one of the core mechanisms of insulin resistance. And when that fat clears out, glucose stops getting stuck in the bloodstream. That's why chickpeas, lentils, beans, and peas don't just lower blood sugar for a meal. They train your body to handle glucose better over time. This is the biggest misunderstanding with legumes. Beans don't fail you because they're bad carbs. They reveal how your metabolism is functioning right now. If your cells are insulin resistant, glucose will spike. As insulin sensitivity improves, those same legumes become some of the most stabilizing, metabolically powerful foods you can eat. As insulin sensitivity improves, those same legumes become some of the most stabilizing, metabolically powerful foods you can eat. Let me put it another way. Carbohydrates get blamed because they reveal the problem. Legumes are not the cause. They're more like a diagnostic mirror. And once you clear the metabolic traffic jam inside your cells, mainly by lowering saturated fat, increasing whole food fiber, and improving mitochondrial function, legumes become part of the solution, not the problem. That's why we don't avoid beans at Mastering Diabetes. We teach you how to incorporate them correctly so they help you improve insulin sensitivity instead of causing spikes. This step, combining protein plus fiber, is one of the most reliable ways to flatten blood sugar meal after meal because it works on the biology that actually controls glucose, not the mythology that blames carbs indiscriminately. Step 5, acid and herbs that fine-tune blood sugar. Now we bring everything together. Parsley, red wine vinegar. This isn't just flavor. Acidic foods like vinegar have been shown to reduce post-meal glucose, improve insulin sensitivity, and flatten glucose curves. Parsley adds antioxidants and freshness without adding fat. That's it. No oil, no sugar, no complicated sauces. Just food that works with your metabolism. Here's what this food combination is doing inside your body. When you eat this meal, multiple systems start working together at the same time. Buckwheat delivers slow, predictable glucose, not a surge. Vegetables slow digestion and control how fast that glucose enters the bloodstream. Chickpeas flatten the spike and feed your gut bacteria. Antioxidants lower oxidative stress inside insulin signaling pathways. And the low-fat structure of the meal removes the brake that normally blocks insulin from doing its job. This isn't eating healthy in a vague sense. This is food acting as metabolic chemistry. You're not forcing blood sugar down. You're restoring the conditions where blood sugar naturally stays stable, not through restriction, not through carb avoidance, but by rebuilding normal physiology, one meal at a time. That's the difference between managing symptoms and fixing the mechanism. Try this simple experiment. Have this exact meal for lunch or dinner 3 days in a row. Track your glucose before eating, 1 hour after, and 2 hours after. Pay attention to what changes. Most people notice smaller post-meal peaks, faster returns to baseline, steadier energy, and fewer crashes. That's not willpower. That's improving insulin sensitivity. And when insulin sensitivity improves, something important happens over time. You can eat more carbohydrates with confidence, rely less on medication, and see better numbers across the board. Not because you tried harder, but because you fixed the root cause. This exact food combination framework is what we teach inside our free Mastering Diabetes training. We show you how to combine food, movement, and daily habits so insulin sensitivity improves and blood sugar comes down naturally. If you want the full step-by-step plan, comment training below and we'll send it to you. And if this video helped you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Until next time, keep those carbs high and that A1C low.